I like the way you use the word imagine there, so it's clearly cutting on. The best way to do it, I'm going to start selling here, is to start recording your calls that your salespeople are making, because so many salespeople are totally unconscious to what they're actually saying and what their sales conversations sound like. The best way I've taught it is to literally get salespeople to count to 2 or 3 seconds in their head after a prospect's finished talking. In that 2 or 3 seconds is literally think about the last few words that salesperson used, the prospect used, sorry. I use the example, we hear it all the time, salespeople are saying things or demoing and their prospects are dropping all these beautiful nuggets left, right and center. All right, that's interesting. Most salespeople get happy ears and think, oh, the prospect like that, I'm just going to move on to the next thing to talk about, rather than saying, so you just use the word interesting there. Why is it interesting? Is that 2 or 3 seconds can help process those last few words, but an even bigger bonus is if the salesperson doesn't say anything in those 2 or 3 seconds, the prospect 5 times out of 10 will go again. As I say, they'll elaborate, they'll give more away. Oh well, the reason I like that is so. Count to 2 or 3 seconds. They will feel uncomfortable at first because nobody likes uncomfortable silence. But once they do that and they build muscle memory, it'll become a lot easier.
Next question. Yep.
Hi, Julia from Candidate. I've been in sales myself for over a decade, and what reassures me sometimes is the way that things don't change in a way. There's a fundamental framework mindset that stays the same. Open to the entire panel, what's the most surprising thing you've learned about sales in the last 12 months?
Yeah, I think, and maybe this is an obvious thing, but if I look back to the SAP days, you turned up, you kind of went through a process, you sold a stack of software and you disappeared with your commission check. And I think the world's changed. I mean, the subscription economy means, and in a business and a sales context, actually, companies are looking to build meaningful relationships, which means you have to be sincere, genuine, authentic. I think it was one of the things that came up. And in the last 12 months, I've seen that, especially we had our kickoff a couple of weeks ago, and there were 3 customers that stood up. Now, for context, they were American customers, so they were, maybe more eulogizing of their sales team than you would find as a British customer. But point being, they all called out the relationships they'd built with the individuals, the fact that they felt like they cared. And it really struck a chord with me, because actually that's true to what we're doing at Zendesk and true to why I think we've been winning versus the bigger companies. But for me, the last 12 months is about that. And therefore, showing that and meaning it is actually quite a difficult thing to do. So that would be my view of the world.
I can only second that, especially in SaaS organizations, you're not selling software. You are stuck, for better or worse, with that customer. And if they don't renew after 12 months, then you're actually losing money a lot of times. And so building out that relationship, people will always buy from people. Most here will have competitors, and who on their slides will say exactly the same as you do, on their websites too. And so it's a matter of, do they like you? Do they believe you? Do they want to work with you and engage in a project with you? That's so completely second that. And the other thing I'm finding, and I'm making myself less popular by saying that in this younger crowd, is that the millennials are very confident in their ability within 3 months of doing anything. And like they want your job, they want to be CRO in 6 months. And I'd love to actually see people do a good job for 12 months and then talk about promotions and raises and stuff. But I'm actually looking for a lot of salespeople in Lisbon and San Francisco, and I will train you well, and there's a beer budget.
So just to build on those 2 points, I think there's 2 things. I think one is the consultative sales. I think to a certain extent that cold calling, rigorous sales has almost gone away just because of the amount of education there is in the market. And the second one I would say is growth mindset. So salespeople actually want to learn and they really want to improve themselves and be the best that they can be. And I would say those 2 things have been really transformational in the last 12 months especially.
Okay, my thing's not necessarily surprising, but it's something that's perhaps changed over time. So I remember when I first started working in the industry that I do, which is placing graduates into technology sales roles, the amount of resistance that I used to receive from young people trying to explain to them they're going to have to go and work for a reseller on the M4 corridor was unbelievable. Whereas now, obviously, I'm really proud to have the opportunity to recruit for companies like yours. And I think that the perception of sales as a profession has changed. And it's certainly something that I know James feels really passionate about. And I hope that the future means that we're going to have maybe more formalized qualifications in the sales industry that give it that extra caliber to what everybody does on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I'm going to slightly disagree to what something that's just been said. In the last 10 years, since I started in sales, this whole debate of like cold calling is it dead? Cold calling, I hope it does stay dead in everyone's perception because it works really well at Refract. When I started in sales, it was all about email, cold calling. Then it suddenly went to who sends the best emails and social. Like everybody's doing that now. Everyone's bored of receiving shitty emails, like 20 of them in their inbox every day. In my 3 years at Refract, I think I've received 3 cold calls. So, like, there's an opportunity for a lot of salespeople is get on the phone, make cold calls because no one else is doing it, and everyone's bored of your emails. So just pick up the phone, and you'll actually have better. You'll actually get more meetings with people.
Yeah, I think one of the key learnings in our world over the last 12, 24 months has been, like, everybody here is aware that the way buyers behave has kind of changed, right? They've got access to a lot more information before they even contact your company. I think something that we've seen is the profile of a successful sales candidate has changed, right? And it's literally about, we kind of went through this thing of being a digital ERP where we tried to hire a lot of ex-Oracle and SAP guys, and it was a disaster, right? Because literally the way people are buying software, even the types of people who are trusted to run digital transformation projects and initiatives within kind of legacy organizations, that profile of buyer has also changed. So I think regardless of experience, right, whether you're kind of 50 years of age or 25 years of age, I think if there's a standard methodology that works and you apply that methodology, I think the experience thing can be receded somewhat, right? In terms of, we've seen really good, successful young guys come through and young girls come through and really be phenomenal salespeople. And when we stand them up against guys who've been in sales for 20, 30 years who kind of expect it to happen and maybe can't operate at the pace that you need somebody to operate at today, and how they use resources to actually get an enterprise sales done, that for me has probably been the most interesting observation that's kind of changed within the technology sales world in the last couple of years. No, they loved it. We like those type of questions. Thank you. Yes, my man.
Thank you. Kevin Taylor from Sales Co. What was the most interesting book on selling that you read last year?
I can't read.
Most interesting book. I tell you what, I did read one recently which I found really interesting. Was by Anthony Iannarino, and it was I can't remember the title, but it's about how to crush your competition. And I thought was a little bit old school in the new day about, it's all about how you prospect and how you get in front of your prospects, and I'm a big believer in that. I think prospecting is like the pinnacle of any successful sales organization, and if you're front and center of your prospects' minds, you'll always stand a chance. So yeah, that was one that I read recently.
A book I've read recently that I think has helped with my career, it's not necessarily a sales text, but I do think it's probably useful for a lot of people, is a book called Fight by a writer called Rachel Wells, and she's an ex-professional boxer. And she's now a psychologist, and basically she's talking about self-limiting beliefs and kind of self-sabotage and those things that lots of people do in business where they don't quite realize their potential because instead of thinking about how they can get to that next step, they're thinking about what's stopping them from getting there. So I think in a sales context, that could support people when they're thinking about, I don't know how to get that promotion or that next deal or how to walk into that client meeting, fearless, knowing that you're going to get the outcome that you want. Really good book.
The one that I've read recently, which was called The Essentialism, which is basically about fewer things done better. So basically, how can you cut out everything else and focus on one or two things that you absolutely need to know? And that's what I'm trying to do, because I take on too much.
I've revisited 2 books this year, last year, sorry. One's in Brian Tracy, How to Make Friends and Influence People, which still to this day holds true, minus, okay, we don't get faxes anymore and shit like that. And the other one is Question-Based Selling, QBS, which I'm a big fan of. It builds on a lot of things that were said tonight, but asking the right questions, asking a lot of questions, and letting the prospect, give you insights that you can then, really, build a solution around. So QBS and Brian Tracy.
Trying to think of a book that isn't for a 7-year-old, truth be known. So I'm not sure how many of those will stick. So probably less sales-based books. I'm probably more obsessed or kind of focused on some of the leadership books and just hearing from leaders of different backgrounds. So one of those, not necessarily a highbrow read, but is Ant Middleton and First Man In. For those familiar with him, he does the SAS program on Channel 4, where he takes civilians in and literally grills them within an inch of their life and see who survives. And really, what was interesting about that is just the psychology and the mindset of an individual that's faced adversity in the most extreme senses, and how he's dealt with that, and how he's continued to try and be balanced and essentially lead from the front. So it's worth a read for those of that particular mindset. That was it.
Just 2 more questions.
So I wanted to ask a question about cold calling, but then you guys addressed it. But in terms of when, we're looking at 6 decision makers, do you think persistence when someone's targeting you, or creativity, would win you as decision makers over?
It's a very good question. It depends. For me, it depends on the individual and who you're trying to target. Persistence is good within reason and balance. I think in extreme cases, I've had email, LinkedIn, phone call, like within 2 minutes of like one another. Like that's just too much. I think the creativity, actually increasingly, is the differentiator. But then with so many people focused on that, we ran a chocolate pie campaign, for instance, which was very effective, but equally the second time you do it, it's less effective. So I think constantly evolving and changing that, a level of persistence for sure. I think taking it back to some old school approaches like picking up the phone, I'm a big fan of. Sometimes writing a letter. Actually, I've responded to someone that wrote me a letter because they took the time. And I thought it was so old school, it was worthy of just responding. So, yeah, a balance of the two. I'm not sure that answers your question, but hopefully it helps.
Unsurprisingly, for me, humor works. I get pestered with emails. I mean, like hundreds, and I don't open any of them. But if I read a catchy subject line, I might open it. Cold calling's back in. I'm really sorry for you junior ones out there, because it's fucking hard, but it's really effective. If you do 200 calls a day, I promise you will be successful. But yeah, and so back to your question. Creative, mix it up. Don't try 10 emails. If emails doesn't work, give me a call. Leave a voicemail. Surprisingly, voicemail is very effective, because then I hear your voice, hear your name. Oh, that's that person. And I might read your email next time.
So I would try and do everything to make sure it's not a cold call. So I would look on LinkedIn. I'd see who I was connected to, how they can make a warm introduction. I'd find anybody that knew anybody in my network who knew that person, and I'd get a warm introduction, because that's the only way I'm going to talk to you.
I think both are important. I think that with persistence specifically, what's really important there is not to actually lose sight of why you're trying to get hold of that person. Sometimes in the chase, you forget about all the pre-call prep that you initially did to make sure that when you actually got that person on the phone, you're able to have a credible conversation. So I think that in the fight to try and get through to somebody, don't forget about why you were trying to call them in the first place.
Real life story this week. I had a prospect who had given me a verbal go-ahead and has basically ignored me for the past 3 weeks. Tried calling him, once every couple of days, no response. Yesterday tried to call him, followed up with a little email saying just the question, "Did I lose you?" ? He responded in like 10 minutes, and it's still alive, but it just kind of showed that I think he knows that I'm calling him, And me just asking that question is like, I'm prepared to shut the door on you here, kind of encourage him to give a response. But I think my kind of persistence of, he knows that I'm still prepared to call him again is kind of in the back of his mind and wants to give me a response.
Yeah, that's gold, that approach. So the we as salespeople, our instinct is to qualify people in and try and keep everybody in the hunt all the time, right? And that mindset, once you've showed value, right? So cold calling is hard, right? I always think persistence is the ultimate ingredient, right? Because once you have the athlete, you can kind of skill them up. But in terms of qualifying people in, and when you're working across multiple exec sponsors or five or six different execs to get a deal done, our instinct is to qualify them in. So that concept of the out email that Richard sent, like, I presume this is no longer important to you, right? Or after a lengthy engagement, this is I presume this is no longer on your radar. And buyers like, they don't often get that type of approach from salespeople. It's, I'm in the area, can we meet for a coffee? Are you free at 3 for a call? Right? It's all this kind of, it's all the same. So when you've delivered value up front, then give them the out, right? Because if they don't want to buy or if they don't want to engage, they'll thank you for that, because it may be a case of timing, right, more than anything else, or resources on their side. But yeah, rather than qualifying everybody in all the time, give them that option of the out, and I think over a longer term they'll be grateful for it, and it should increase your likelihood of getting a deal done.
Very good. One last question. Go on, standing at the back there. This is actually a question I think something I'd like to know. Can you speak up? Sorry. So, Guy from Student Beans. Obviously, you're very, very successful and hire lots of people. So, I'm finding coming back into the job market, looking more in the enterprise sales spaces. What's more important, and how do you then manage it further? Experience versus potential. Just putting that out, and obviously having Brian and the
Yeah, Elaine to my left's probably quite a good person to answer this question. But for me, I think it depends personally on the job role that you're hiring for and the level. I will always go for will over experience if you held a gun to my head. I've hired people before who've, on the face of it, they've worked for some big flashy companies, and but they haven't had the will, they haven't had the desire. And if someone is coachable, if someone admits that they don't know it all, but they're prepared to want to know it, that'll stand out for me to the person who kind of stands and brags about all the wonderful things they've done in the past. Not that I'm discounting that, but I think certainly the will and desire and wanting to become better is a big selling point for me personally.
I think it all depends on the company that you're applying to, what stage they're at in their growth, whether they feel that they've got people who you could learn from, or if that person needs to be the first person in that position. Also, the hiring manager themselves. So me personally, I enjoy hiring for potential, but it's not everybody's bag. Sometimes people want to see that they're going to hire somebody who's immediately going to be able to drop into the role and deliver. If you are applying for a role where you're coming from a standpoint of perhaps not having the whatever years on paper type experience that sometimes people request, I think that, as Richard just said, the coachability factor is super duper important, and making sure that you come across as somebody who has not only the will to learn, but also has demonstrated when they've picked up something quickly before is going to help you in that job search process.
So in my head, like potential is exactly what I'm looking for in regards to hiring, but it's also a time pressure as well, because you have a lot of candidates who are coming through the door. But that's why recruiters at these companies are so important, because my recruiter challenges me all the time to look at different hiring, to look at diversity of thought, to look at different backgrounds. So the way into any of those companies is recruiters and how you win those over, because they are the ones that we challenge in the hiring managers.
I like loyalty, and I like passion and energy. And so if somebody changes jobs every 6 to 12 months consistently, I don't even look at the CV anymore. And anybody that comes into a meeting with me unprepared or with low energy, I end the meeting within 10 minutes generally, because I have better things to do than sit around with people that obviously don't want the job. So those two.
look, it's a build on all of the things that you've heard. I'd agree with everything, by the way. What I would say is it depends, really. And equally, it's back to something I was talking about earlier, which is having a good understanding of where you are and what your skills gaps are as well. You know, if you've had no enterprise sales experience and you're going for a strategic account exec role or a global account manager role, that's a stretch too far too soon. But if you're coming in prepared with the appetite to come in at maybe a lower level with the goal of getting there and stating that up front, then, you know, personally, I'd be absolutely more inclined to go with someone with the energy and the right attitude. But it is a balance, and certainly the time pressures is also tough. And in the context of our business, and by the way, we're also hiring, so just to put that plug out there, it's a balance really, and it's knowing that someone's going to come in and be successful. I think I would speak for everyone in saying there's nothing worse than hiring someone and seeing them, you know, flounder and be unsuccessful and frankly lose confidence along the way. So yeah, that's the mindset that certainly I have. There you go.
Right. So just if we can, there's going to be a couple more comments I'd like to make, but can we have a round of applause for all the speakers, please?